Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Master Customer Centricity. My name is Jens Henschel. I'm going to be your coach and presenter for the session, and thank you very much that you're taking 1 hour of your busy schedule to spend the time with us to talk about this important topic, customer centricity. Obviously, we want to be investigating together as buyers and sellers that we are on how we can build those winning relationships and how we can do this together by unleashing our customer centricity mindset. All right, let me kick it off here on my side with a little introductory part on who we actually are. So that you know who you're talking to. So some of you might be familiar with us. I represent a company called FIVIS. We are a training and consultancy company. We're based here in London, and we help procurement teams, sales teams to build new habits of behavior, new habits of customer centricity, to build winning B2B relationships. And our motto, our mission, quite frankly, the reason that I get up in the morning every day is we want to build bridges between procurement and sales, between the procurement function on the customer side and the sales function on the supplier side. We fundamentally believe there's tons of value that's just a way to be unlocked if both sides were just to understand each other a little better, if both sides would be, reaching out to each other a little more. That really unleashes value across company boundaries. When we founded this company 7 years ago, we really realized there's a big divide between procurement and sales, between the buyer on the customer side and the seller on the supplier side, and we want to bridge this gap as much as we can. So how do we do that? Well, we obviously spend a lot of time with procurement teams to help them understand what is customer centricity, how can they build customer-centric mindset to build better relationships with their internal stakeholders and in particular with their suppliers. Equally so, we spend a lot of time with suppliers and sales teams and help them understand how to better comprehend their customers. How can they unleash a customer-centric selling approach to anticipate customer needs, to become that supplier of choice, that preferred partner that their customer and their buyers are looking for. And in this webinar today, I would like you to experience a little, an inkling on what we would normally do in our workshops and our trainings. I would like you to go away from this webinar having learned on how to build winning relationships and also having started to think in a customer-centric way, but more on that in a little while. Let me just quickly show to you on what we have prepared for you. What is the agenda that we want to take you through? Obviously, we have a little introductory process. And then we go straight into the theory of customer centricity, and we will, do this step by step. I know we have a very diverse team here, and this is amazing. We have a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers in this call, and I want us to first start investigating what does customer centricity look like on the procurement side, because as many procurement professionals on this call will agree with me, and I've been a buyer, for more than 20 years. Thinking about the customer, the word customer centricity is not really part of our vocabulary, right? We normally think about suppliers, about categories, about spend, about negotiation, right? This is normally the world and the terminology that we use. So we want to explore a little bit what actually customer centricity means for procurement professionals. It will be very interesting for you as sellers and sales managers as well, though, to really understand and comprehend what is going on the procurement side. You want to listen in on that part as well. The next agenda point is, well, what does then customer centricity mean for sellers and sales professionals? And I'm sure if you are part of the sales community, you will have heard the word customer centricity before. I'm sure, throughout your career, your managers, your leadership teams might have reached out to you and say, well, if you were just, focusing a little more on the customer, we could be selling so much more, so much better, so much more profitable, right? But I'm also sure that, nobody has really told you, what does it actually mean? So how should you act in a customer-centric way that actually your customers perceiving you to be that customer-centric partner that you want to be? And we obviously want to lift the carpet here and really help you understand what is expected from you as sales manager and supplier. And then we want to bring it all together. So how can we then, form winning relationships between buyers and sellers after having activated this customer centricity mindset? How does this really work? What do we need to be doing to build these winning relationships? And last but not least, we have reserved some time for your questions. So throughout the webinar, while I'm presenting, please don't feel shy to put your questions already into the respective window, and we will address all of those towards the end. We will also sending out a video and recording of this session after today's call. Okay, but let's move on now, because I think what we've learned in this little exercise that we've done together that buyers and sellers, have certain views, of each other, and they're not always the most positive views. We see each other as sometimes as partners, or we want to see each other as partners, but then when it comes to the negotiation, we are having this kind of win-lose attitude again. Well, if I give something, I need to something in return. I have to be, competitive. Collaboration between procurement and sales sometimes is not really, done as much as it could be. And I would argue, though, that this is a hindrance point. This is an obstacle to unleash great value across company boundaries, to release value between supplier organizations and customer organizations. If buyers and sellers don't understand each other, if they're not really collaborating, if they're not really comprehending why the other person is acting in a certain way, then it's very difficult to create these valuable relationships between supplier organization and customer organization. And I would even make the case that we are very similar as functions, procurement and sales. We're pretty much joined at the hip, and we are just two different sides of the same coin. And if we want to really create value between ourselves, we need to become much more closer and understand each other much better than we do today. So how do we do that? How can we build these winning relationships between procurement and sales, between the customer organization and the supplier organization? So the short answer to this question is, well, we need to become more customer-centric. And what do I mean by that? I do believe that, procurement and sales professionals both need to change their mindset. We need to, start thinking more in the terms of, this is a customer that I'm dealing with, be it the supplier or be it the customer organization, and how can I make sure that I address their needs so that they can fulfill my needs in the best way possible as well. So we need to change our mindset from being supplier-centric, functional-centric, product-centered, self-centered to a mindset of becoming truly customer-centric in the respective functions that we are working in. And now in the remainder part of this webinar, I will show you what I mean by that. What does it really mean to be customer-centric as procurement professional? What does it really mean to be customer-centric as sales professional? We'll kick it off with customer centricity in procurement. As I mentioned at the outset of this webinar, customer centricity, the word customer centricity in itself is something probably that many procurement professionals have never heard of, right? When we start our journey as buyers, we're thinking in categories, supplier markets, negotiation tactics. We think about commodities, pricing, et cetera, Very rarely do we think about, well, we need to be thinking and acting in a customer-centric way. And this is a disconnect. If we really want to be successful as buyers, internally with our internal stakeholders and externally with our suppliers, we need to start approaching our procurement processes from a customer's point of view. And let me explore with you now what that really means if you are in procurement. And I would invite everybody, the salespeople included, just to go along with this, because you will learn a lot about the procurement side here as well. And I would like to use a very simple example that everybody can relate to, and so that we can focus very much on the methodology and not get lost into details here. So let's take this example of you work in procurement, and you work in procurement for the company that produces the Snickers bars, right? It's my favorite chocolate bar, my favorite candy bar, and you are part of their procurement team, right? And what is your task? What are you supposed to be doing in this procurement team? Well, you are a buyer for plastic packaging, right? You only are tasked to buy plastic packaging for Snickers, right? That you see on your screen here. So you are not bothered with, the peanuts, the cocoa, the milk, God knows what. No, you're only tasked to buy packaging. And everybody that is in procurement here on the call will probably, relate to that when I say how we normally approach this task is, well, we will be reflecting as buyers, who are the suppliers out there? What are the prices of what they're offering? What are their capabilities? What is the capacity in the market? Who are our competitors that also buy maybe packaging? This is how we think. We develop a category plan, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I would challenge this approach. Is this approach really leading to the best results that you can achieve as the buyer? Will that really lead to building winning relationships across company boundaries? And I would argue it does not, because it's functionally centered, it's buyer-centric, and it's not really adding a lot of value to the customer that we are servicing, right? And let me explain that to you in some simple, illustrations here. So where does demand really come from for Snickers bars? Well, it comes from the end consumer, right? So, and this is obviously, this gentleman here that you see has stepped into a supermarket, has gone through the snacks aisle, and has picked out a Snickers bar that he wants to consume, right? And this is the ultimate demand signal where the whole value chain is being kicked off from, right? And we as buyers, even if we only buy a small ingredient of this finished product, we want to understand what are his needs? What does this customer expect from us as Snickers company? But also, what do they expect with regards to packaging, sustainability? Is there some kind of tactile, elements to the packaging that are important to the end consumer? So we want to be spending time with this end consumer to understand what really their needs are. And the unfortunate news is, and I probably, I'm 100% right to say that because I've been there myself, none of us in procurement would ever do what I just told you to do, namely to reach out to the end consumer to understand what is actually that they are expecting from the finished product that we're selling as a company. But this is so important because this is where it starts off from. We need to understand what the end consumer needs are, unfiltered, to really be able to source in the best way possible. But then also we need to take into consideration that Snickers as a company is not selling to this end consumer. But Snickers is selling these candy bars to a customer who could be, for instance, a supermarket chain, right? A Tesco, a Sainsbury's, a Walmart, Lidl, Aldi, whatever supermarket you have in your respective country. Well, these are the customers that Snickers is servicing, and who are, their needs? What are their needs that they're, want to be taken care of with regards to what we're doing with our supply chains? Do they need some certain flexibility, agility? Do they have any sustainability targets? Do we need to support them maybe with some marketing and advertisement campaign? Do they maybe want to have something specific on the packaging with regards to what they're offering there in their supermarkets and on the shelves? So here we want to make sure that we understand these needs in the best way possible, also as buyers. And here again, I'm 100% sure that most of you have not spent a single day with your customers to better understand what their respective needs are. And this is a missed opportunity because if we have not understood their needs in particular, we will not be able to set up a supply chain or communicate to our suppliers what we really require. Also, and this is maybe something that you're more familiar with as buyers, we obviously have a lot of stakeholders, right? The leadership team of Snickers here, the CEO, the finance department, the R&D department, product development team, they all obviously have a say and an opinion on what the business needs are. And we want to consider them as customers, right? We as procurement folks want to go in and advise them what we think the business needs should be, what they should be considering, what we're hearing from the supplier market on what really works and what does not work, on what really caters to the end consumer's needs that we have built an opinion on as well. Right? So we want to be a service organization to them, but at the same time, maybe also a challenger internally, questioning maybe certain decisions that these leadership teams are taking. And then a very important stakeholder that we want to make sure that they're happy with, namely the operations team, right? I mean, what we are buying and what our suppliers that we've selected are delivering to our plants, we want to make sure that they're not causing any issues on the production lines, because stopping our production lines is the worst thing that can happen, right? So we want to make sure that whatever packaging material we buy is servicing and addressing those particular needs with regards to the operation as well. So if we put this into more of a graph or understanding, let me just talk to this point here real quick before we go into a general overview. I mean, what we've done now pretty much, we've identified as buyers our business needs that we have as an organization, right? We've collected needs with regards to the end consumer. We collected needs with regards to the customer. We've, sat down with our stakeholders to understand their needs. And we've collected a whole host of business needs that you see here on the left-hand side, right? And we can have obviously a discussion if these are, is this complete or not? Are we missing anything? But that is not the point. The point is you will have a lot of business needs collected, and some of them might be contradicting each other. And that's totally normal. And you just want to form an opinion. What are now the most important needs from your perspective? And you want to align that decision-making process, that thought process with your internal stakeholders, that everybody is fully aware on what the business needs are that you as a Snickers company want to pursue, so that you can translate that in the best way possible to your suppliers. So now let's go and represent this in a little visual so that we can capture this kind of customer-centric procurement process more holistically. It all starts with you understanding the end consumer. It continues with you understanding and spending time with the customer. It's continuous with you sitting down and spending time with the internal stakeholders of yours that are also your customers in the end of the day. That will really allow you to form an opinion, to form a view on how you should go about buying that specific category, that plastic packaging that you're responsible for. And it allows you as well to then communicate in a customer-centric way to your suppliers as well, who are, by the way, also your customer. You want to articulate to them, well, this is what our needs are, and this is the reason why we have these needs. And you, supplier, are also an important stakeholder to me, and I want to know what your needs are so that I can address them in the best way possible. So customer-centric buying is making sure that you understand internally and externally the respective requirements that are important to you. Okay, so now that we've understood what customer centricity and procurement is, let's go and turn the page now what customer centricity means in sales. So customer centricity in sales, as I said earlier on, customer centricity is obviously something that you as sales professionals probably have heard of before, right? So you probably have heard about the terminology, you've been challenged on that to be more customer focused, but again, probably nobody has told you how to do that, how to really behave and act in a customer-centric way that is also perceived by the customer to be, that value-adding, behavior that builds those winning relationships. So let's have a look into that on how to do this in the best way possible. And we use the same example here. Now we just, swap places. So we're no longer talking about, you working for Snickers. You actually sell something to Snickers. So you are part of a, plastic packaging company that produces these plastic wraps for Snickers, and you sell that amazing, packaging solution to the Snickers company, maybe to the buyer that we've just discussed, right? Now, how would you go about this, right? If I were to ask you, start selling this plastic packaging, I can probably assure you, you as sales professionals and suppliers would first start understanding, well, what is this product all about? You would be building your little PowerPoint deck with, a lot of slides on how great you are in terms of a packaging solution provider, what amazing quality you have with regards to plastic packaging, what amazing quality standards you have, the many production locations that you have, how much money you spend on R&D, how many different customers you have, and you would show me all these great brand logos of the customers that you're already servicing. So these are the standard presentation that probably you would show to many of those buyers and customers that you would be serving, right? But is this really customer-centric, or is this more supplier-centric, product-centered, self-centered? Because what your customer is really interested in is this, right? We've just learned that, right? Your buyer and your customer are concerned with how can we make sure that this end consumer that picks up our Snickers bar from the shelf, that is the ultimate signal to create demand, how can we make sure that we serve that customer in the best way possible? And what will you do as supplier and sales manager to support us to make sure that this consumer is buying and buying and buying and buying more of our product? What will you do to make us successful in our reality as Snickers, which is obviously that reality of that end consumer? Now, the challenge for you as suppliers and sales managers, well, your reality might be looking like this. And I don't mean this in a dismissive or condescending way. Absolutely not, right? This might be how your reality looks like. But you produce a lot of plastic packaging out of, oil-based ingredients, and it's huge production sites, highly automated, a lot of chemical reactions. You're very proud of your R&D capabilities. So this is more where you feel at home. This is more what you are really, familiar with. But the trick is, if we want to be customer-centric and customer-centric sales professionals, we want to make sure that we bridge that void, that we bring in that, customer reality into our own organization and explain pretty much to our organization what this customer reality is, so that you as a supplier can come up with solutions that makes that customer successful in their respective reality. That is what it's all about. This is what customer-centric selling is all about. So leaving behind all patterns of behavior that are more focused on you, on your product, on you as an organization, and more embracing who is that customer, who is their respective end consumer, and what do we need to be doing as suppliers to make that customer more successful in their reality. So let's summarize this in our visual. So where we left it off with was obviously understanding the customer, right? The consumer, the customer, their stakeholders, the buyer interacts with us as the seller, And we want to, use that information that we gathered, that insights about, who our customer really is and what they consist of and what their business needs are. And we want to translate and transition that to our internal stakeholders that we are interacting with. We are an enabler and facilitator as sales managers to make these internal functions aware on what our end consumer or what the end consumer and our direct customer actually wants from us. And we want to make sure that we incentivize these stakeholders, that they also think beyond their respective responsibilities and say, okay, what do we need to be doing as supplier with our suppliers and the suppliers to make sure that these customer needs are addressed in the best way possible. This is really on how we activate a customer centricity mindset throughout the whole value chain. So if you bring this all together, you can see that there's so many similarities between buyers and sellers. We both need to be acting and thinking in a customer-centric way. We need to be focusing on our customers to be able to build winning relationship between each other, right? We as buyers, we need to be able to, focus more on really what those needs are on the consumers and customer side and what our stakeholders really require. And as suppliers, we want to immerse ourselves in our customer reality to be able to translate that into requirements that our internal stakeholders and counterparts and peer functions should be following through. So the question really remains is, how do we become customer-centric as buyers and sellers now? Now that we've understood what it looks like in reality, what we need to be doing as procurement and sales, how do we put this into practice? And we could be spending hours here to go into the nitty-gritty details on what you as buyers would need to be doing to, understand more your end consumer needs. Or we could be spending time what you as sales professionals need to be doing to better understand maybe the buyer on your customer side. But I would like to focus more on what we need to be doing as a fundamental first step. We fundamentally first need to think and act in a customer-centric way. We need to be establishing a customer-centricity mindset. We need to be leaving these old patterns of behavior behind that are more self-centered, product-centered, functional-centered. So let's explore how we can establish that customer-centricity mindset. And I would like to do this with the help of a little exercise, because I do know, without knowing you, I'm 100% sure that you are already thinking and acting in a customer-centric way. I'm 100% sure that you're all able to unleash a customer-centricity mindset because you do that on a daily basis. So let's go through that. Let's do this as part of a little exercise here. I would like you to reflect for a moment, to think of a person, a loved one, a good friend, your husband, your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, somebody that you've built an amazing relationship with, maybe recently, could be a good colleague, somebody from university, somebody from school, somebody that you're still in contact with, and that you have really an amazing relationship built with. Think of that person, visualize that person in the back of your mind. And then I want you to reflect just for a few minutes here. What are the actions that you took to build this relationship, to establish that relationship with them? What are the actions that you took proactively to make sure that you establish that winning relationship with that respective counterpart? Again, it could be a boyfriend, could be a husband, wife, could be anybody that is close to your heart. What did you do to build that great relationship with them? I'll give you a few minutes to reflect on that. Let's take 2 minutes and then we debrief together what you came up with. Again, think of somebody that is really, really close to you and reflect on the actions that you took to establish that winning relationship with them. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Two minutes are up.
Thank you, Ivan. So let's debrief all together on what you came up with. So I, for example, I selected here my fiancée, Sarah. We're together now for 13 years. I was thinking about her. Ivan, who did you select on your side?
I selected my brother.
Your brother. Okay, also a great example. Yeah. So let's see what the audience is what they've reflected on. Please put into chat now what kind of actions you took in the past to build these winning relationships with them. With, again, either your brother, as Ivan did, or I picked my fiance. What actions did you drive proactively to build these winning relationships? I see here Alessio said, well, understanding what they care about. That's actually a very good point, right? You want to make sure that you get under their skin to really understand what does caring mean for them. We have also here Danny saying, well, you want to actively listen about the person's needs, about their pains, hurdles, showing them ways to overcome these, to build up trust on a long-term basis. Yeah, and obviously what he said as well, which is really interesting, Danny, good point here. Well, you want to regularly check in with your counterpart on how they're doing, right? I mean, it's good and great if you are knowing now what your partner's needs are, but these needs can change over time, right? You want to make sure that you also understand what the needs are tomorrow in 2 years' time, right? So it's a continuous process that we want to take into effect. Christian there saying you should build trust, right? And I think this is a very interesting point, and that really comes up over and over when we do these exercises. It's very valid, Christian, that we want to make sure that we have a trusting relationship, with those, loved ones, and that we do this very well subconsciously. But how do we really do this? What actions do you take to build and establish that trust? That's something a little bit more tricky to think of, right? We all know trust is probably the ultimate goal, but what are the actions that we're taking? Mark says here, well, we need to take time to understand the person. Yeah, I think that's a very valid point there as well. Again, it's not a 5-minute exercise. If you really want to build a winning relationship with someone, you need to invest time, and you've probably seen that with your partners, your friends. It is a time investment. It is resource intensive to do this in the best way possible. Leo says here, well, we want to be honest and open. Absolutely right. I mean, obviously, probably what you mean there, Leo, is that we probably want to be a little vulnerable, right? Sometimes building trust or being honest means that we also say, well, this is something that I'm not good at. Again, if I'm thinking about back to Sarah, probably if I share with her, well, I'm not good at this, right? And I know that I'm not good at this. This is a flaw. I'm working on it, but I will probably never be, the best on a certain issue that she might see as an issue in me, right? So if we're honest about that, that establishes trust, because it makes us a little vulnerable, right? So vulnerability is a big component of establishing a winning relationship with somebody. To have integrity, Dubai, very good point, right? You want to be, maintaining your credibility. If you say that you would be doing something, you need to do it. You need to respond to somebody's needs in the way they want to be responded to, and not just, what makes you feel comfortable. And this is part really of integrity, that you say, well, I understand you, I hear you, what you need from me, and I'll do it in the way that I promised you to do, because I know that is really that's really important to you. Okay, let me just check the chat here. Provide perspective, provide space to reflect about our relationship. Yeah, I think this is a very good point there, JRMB there. Absolutely right. We want to make sure that we also reflect, what's going on in the relationship today. Is anything great, or is there maybe points or areas that we need to improve? And obviously we could do this by asking our counterpart, which is a little passive, or we do this in a proactive way and say, okay, let's reflect on the strengths in the relationship. Let's reflect on the weaknesses, and how can we proactively use some of the strengths to overcome the weaknesses? Very good point. Yeah, celebrating milestones and success together, Tanya. I think very, very good point as well. We want to make sure, and I think celebrating successes is a great keyword. Thank you for sharing that, Tanya, because that means we also need to set goals. What do we want to see achieved in the relationship? And something that probably in a private context we're not really sometimes aware of, that there's also goals that we want to see achieved. There's also success that we want to define. Let's say if I take my partner Sarah, my goal with her is to see her happy, right? And to be loved by her, right? So I'm investing time, listening, responding to her needs. But I obviously, want to see the positive result of her eventually marrying me, right? So there is something that I want to see in return on my investment. If she's sad, if she's not loving me, well, then it's probably something that I'm not going to be happy about. I'm not seeing that I'm winning in that relationship with her. Very good point. Great feedback, guys. Thank you for your input. Thanks, Ivan, for annotating there as well. Let's take a quick screenshot, if we could, so that we have it as part of our files here. Great stuff. Thanks, everybody. So I think what you've realized in this little exercise that we've just done is that you all know on how to build winning relationships. You all have a customer-centric mindset already in you. And you apply this in your private relationships very, very successfully. The unfortunate news is that, well, we do know it, but we don't really know it, right? We do it in a way, that is just natural to us, but we don't really have a methodology from 1 to 10 that we apply and that we regularly go through to then be sure that we're succeeding in this. So how can we, what we've just, built together, how can we put this into a framework that we can repeat over and over and over, right? To be sure that we're successful in unleashing our customer-centricity mindset. So let me outline our approach to this, right? So the first fundamental need that your counterpart has, your loved one back home, Sarah, for instance, right, that I've selected as an example here, she wants me to genuinely care about her needs. And some of you mentioned that, right? We want to build, I think Alessio it was, we want to build an empathetic relationship with these people. We want to make sure that we get under the skin, understand them, and we want to do this proactively, right? We don't just want to sit down and listen to their needs. We don't just want to, questioning them about their needs. We want to proactively anticipate, well, what is important to Sarah? What do I need to be doing tomorrow to be addressing the needs that are important to her tomorrow? Right? So there's a level of proactivism that we want to show. So I care is something fundamental in regards to building your customer-centricity mindset. Another element that we haven't really discussed so much, but which is also very, very important, we want to make sure that we show that we're competitive in the relationship. And I mean this in a positive sense of the word. We don't want to show to our partner, our loved one, our friends, that we're complacent about the relationship, that we couldn't care less about the relationship. We want to make sure that we are competing, and that means that we're acknowledging how our counterpart wants this relationship to be managed. We want to be showing them that we know that they have alternatives and that we're catching up with the next best alternative that they have available to them. Again, I'll bring this back to my example with Sarah. She doesn't expect me to be the best man in the world. Absolutely not, right? But I think what she wants me to acknowledge is that she has alternatives and that at least I'm doing my best to slightly catching up with the next best alternative. That makes her feel comfortable that I'm not complacent, but competitive and addressing her needs on how she wants to have this relationship managed. And improving, some of you mentioned that we want to obviously reflect, and we want to do this regularly. We want to do this consistently, and we want to do this proactively on how we can improve the relationship. All of you can sit down and think about the person that you've selected and think about the relationship. What are the strong points in this relationship? What are the weak points? And what can I do proactively to overcome some of these weak points, maybe using and leveraging some of the stronger points that I've identified. We can do this proactively. We don't need to just wait for feedback. We can do this really, really just our own, proactively reaching out and improve the relationship. And lastly, we discussed this as well as a group here just now. We want to respond to our counterparts' needs in the way they want to be responded to, in their time frame, in their language, whatever makes them happy. We should be responding to them in the way they expect us to. So caring, competing, improving, responding are the fundamental expectations that your counterpart will have from you to make a relationship work. And we all know what happens if we are not doing one of these components. If we're not caring, if we're not improving, if we're not competing, if we're not responding well, we might have a little of a fallout with our loved ones, right? We have an argument, and then we're going to realign on, they say, well, you didn't really care about this, you didn't really respond about that. And then we realign on our expectations and crack on and build a winning relationship. And that comes to the last point. The circle is complete if we care, compete, improve, and respond. That really allows us and earns us the right to win in the relationship as well. And back to Tanya's point, this is so important with unleashing a customer-centricity mindset. There is also a level of you wanting to have and receive something in return. And sometimes it feels a bit odd to think about that in a private context. But again, coming back to the example with Sarah, obviously I want to see her happy. I want to see her loved, and I want to be loved as well. So that's pretty much my goal in the relationship. That's what I consider as winning. So if you want to be customer-centric and build a winning relationship with someone, you want to make sure that you articulate and define for yourself what your goals are, what success looks like, and that you can articulate then also to your respective counterparts so that they are aware what they need to be doing to make you winning in that respective relationship. So this model we call FIVIS, right? And we developed this over the last 15 years, and we believe in this model so much that we even called our companies FIVIS. FIVIS, 5 habits that start with the word I. 5 actions and behaviors and habits that you have to take proactively to build a winning relationship with somebody. Why do we select the word I? Because it's your individual responsibility to do that. You cannot wait for anybody else, to care, to compete, improve, or respond to the win. It is you individually that needs to take action. That is what is expected from you. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if we could apply this, what you already do? You apply this model day in, day out, right? You just didn't know about it, but now you know about it, what it is, this methodology. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could apply this also in a business context? And of course it would be amazing, because that would be the magic formula to establish winning relationships, maybe with our suppliers, maybe with our internal stakeholders, maybe with that buyer that we're struggling to build that relationship with. So why don't we apply this more in a business context? The simple answer to this question is, well, because most of our interactions that we have in a business environment, be it with our stakeholders, be it with a customer, be it with a buyer, are stressful situations. And how do we act and behave in stressful situations? Well, we want to run away from stressful situations. We want to fight the stressful situation. And this is ingrained in our DNA. And there's a lot of studies, on this that prove that, in our DNA, we learned over the millennia to act in certain ways in stressful situations. When we were fighting the dinosaurs and the saber-toothed tigers and God knows what back in the wilderness, we developed strategies. And those were the strategies, namely to run away or to fight the beast. And this is now ingrained in our DNA to think, okay, this is a stressful situation. It reminds us of our ancestors and how they behaved, meeting a buyer, for instance. And we think, okay, in this stressful situation, I again need to run away. I need to again fight the situation. It does not mean that you physically fight or physically run away, at least I hope not, from your customers or buyers. But it means that you react in a certain way, which is more product-centered, more supplier-centered, more self-centered. You're falling back on this 200 PowerPoint deck, that you have created without really articulating, that you've understood your customer's perspective, your customer's needs, their desires, etc., etc., etc. So what we obviously want to do, we want you to apply this customer centricity mindset that you already apply so successfully in a B2B context, right? So we talk about habits. We're forming habits in our workshops and masterclass to really help you understand, how can I really generally care about my customer or the counterpart that I want to build a winning relationship with? How can I understand, the true customer needs proactively, without just listening and asking them questions? How can I make sure that I'm not being perceived as complacent, but as competitive? How can I form this habit to always be perceived as being a competing counterpart in the relationship so that I address that fundamental expectation that my counterpart has? I also want to make sure, obviously, in a business context, that I show proactively that I improve, right? And in most of your B2B relationships, you probably will be able to spot some of the weaknesses that you see in the relationship that you can address. So we want to make sure that we, gain perspective and gain a habit of continuously improving. We want to make sure that we know all the stakeholders that are important to our respective counterpart and that we address their needs in the best way possible, and the language that they want to be responded to, and the time frame and format they feel most comfortable. And also, lastly, if we really want to create that success, well, we want to make sure that we've defined for ourselves what really success look like. What does winning means for us? If you invest into a relationship as buyers or sellers by caring, competing, improving, responding, for your respective counterpart, you also want to define for yourself, well, what is it that I'm going to get in return? What does success look like? Align it internally and communicate it then to your respective counterparts so that they are aware on what they need to be doing to make you win in that relationship as well. So this is our customer centricity mindset. And I want you to, reflect on that as part of a little homework exercise. So after today's call, independent if you're buyer or seller, I want you to reflect on exactly that. And maybe even if you're a procurement professional, maybe think of the seller that you're interacting with. If you're a salesperson, maybe think of the buyer that you're interacting with. Really sit down and think, how do I show to my respective counterpart that I care? How do you articulate that? How do you make them aware that you care, that you've understood what their needs are? How do you show proactively to your counterpart that you compete, that you're not complacent, but trying to catch up with their next best alternative? Are you even aware of their next best alternative? How do you show to your buyer or seller that you're interacting with that you improve? What do you do to respond well? And have you really defined really what winning means, and have you communicated, proactively to either the buyer or seller that you want to build that winning relationship with? So this is the first step for you to take to build winning relationships with the respective person that you're interacting with. We're coming close to the end of the webinar already, and I just want to leave you with this. If you want to learn more about how you can activate your customer centricity mindset, how you can care, compete, improve, respond, and win in the best way possible, well, contact us. We're running a lot of workshops and masterclasses in that space. And we also have in summer, towards the end of August, especially for sales professionals, a little workshop here over a 6-week period where we train you, and particularly on this mindset on how you can activate that with your customers, and in particular with those procurement professionals that you might be interacting with on a daily basis. So if you're interested in that, please scan the QR code or reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you on what this course is all about. Alrighty, okay, we're coming close to the end, and let me loop back with Ivan there in the background that has collected some of the questions. Let me check in with Ivan. We have a few minutes left. Maybe you have time for 1 or 2 questions. What is our audience interested in?
Yes, here's first one. I think this one coming from a procurement professional. As a procurement professional, what should be the first step as a buyer to establish my customer centricity mindset?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, right? And we get this from many procurement professionals because obviously, as I said early on, it's not so normal for us to think about the customer. And obviously in the day-to-day, administrative burden that we have to manage as buyers, it's difficult to really identify what the next or the first step is in this regard. So to really to start caring, what I would do if I was, for instance, being that buyer responsible for plastic packaging, I would set in my calendar to spend some quality time with my internal stakeholders. Just a day with them, let's say with the finance team, one day with the marketing team, one team with the operations team, maybe even to go one day to a plant to understand what's actually going on, and starting from there to learn their language, understand their needs, what is important to them, and then maybe reaching out further to go to the customer, in this case, obviously even the retailers, maybe join a sales colleague of yours to go to the customer's organization and hear firsthand on what's on their mind. Maybe spend a day with the end consumer, maybe consume the product yourself and put yourself into the end consumer's shoes, just to gain that perspective and credibility that you as buyer also know what's going on in your respective business environment. That would be the first step that I would be taking. Maybe one last question, Ivan, before we have to close the session today.
Sure, Jens. There are a few more. They're coming from sales professionals, but in general, they all sum up into one, which is very similar. So what's your recommendation for sales professionals? How do they develop and establish a customer-centric mindset?
Yeah, I would start with caring, right? I mean, what your customers and their buyers, what winds them up the most is a supplier just to say, hey, we're an amazing supplier. We have a great solution. Just buy from us. We know that we're the market leader in this or that. We're very good. We're very competitive. Just buy from us. And you leave it to the buyer or the customer then to decide to figure out why. Why should we buy from you? What differentiates you really? What makes, if we buy from you, what makes us successful then, right? So answering or investigating that question, what is really your customer's business needs and what are you doing to contribute to their success and their respective reality? Remember that picture that I've shown you with the Snickers reality is obviously end consumer picking off a Snickers bar from the shelf. That's where demand is coming from. So if you want to have a meaningful conversation with your customer and with their buyer, quite frankly, you want to allude to that. You say, hey, look, we understand what your challenge is in the end consumer market. We know what triggers people to buy or not to buy from you. And you know what? We as packaging suppliers, we have an idea here on how we can help you to maybe address some of your end consumers' needs. And this is how we think we could help you to make you more successful. So starting with the customers' and consumers' needs instead of starting with, hey, we are the greatest supplier in the world. We have so many different clients. We have so much invested into R&D. This will just alienate your customer and their buyers. And they have heard this so many times. So start with the customer's perspective, with the end consumer perspective. Show them that you've understood. Show them that you know what their reality is all about and how you can make them successful in their respective reality. Excellent. I think we're coming close to the hour. Yeah, I think we're at 3 p.m. here, UK time. So last word from my end here. Thank you very much for your attention here today. You've been a fantastic team. Hopefully we could trigger some thoughts and some, thinking in you on how you can build these winning relationships, on how you can become customer-centric, either as a buyer or seller. Hopefully we'll see each other soon. And until then, I wish you all the best. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.